So, welcome to the Global Leadership Exchange with TML Partners, where we're bringing together marketing, brand, commercial leaders to share their insights on the market. I'm Izzy Greaves, a senior consultant in our sports and entertainment practice, and I'm delighted to be joined by two leaders from global sports teams based on opposite sides of the pond. So we've got Dan Ginger from Newcastle United and James Ruth from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it'd be great to get an introduction from both of you and to understand a little bit more about your roles. So James, if you don't mind, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. So James Ruth, CMO of the Tampa Bay Bucs, like you said, I've been in my role for about 9 months at this point, so still in the early stages. But before coming to the Bucs and to the NFL, I actually spent 10 years in global football in the States. So was previously at Austin FC as their CMO. I was part of launching the club and was there for about 3.5, 4 years. And then before that, I was at Major League Soccer, the offices, headquarters in New York. So spent about 7 years there. Great experience in terms of, being around the sport of football, global football on both sides, club and league. And then I've transitioned over to, at least within the States, the 800-pound gorilla of the NFL, which has been a fun sort of transition. So
amazing. Excited to hear more. And Dan, we'll pass over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Ginger, the Director of Brand Marketing and Digital Media here at Newcastle United. So for us, that covers everything from our in-house creative team, content, across our social and digital platforms, as well as responsible for the marketing streams across, let's say, brand marketing, but also our retail business, our membership business, and also all things venue related as well. Not too dissimilar to James. I've only been in role for, I think it's coming up 8 months now. Prior to that, was in the world of tennis as the SVP of brand and marketing at the ATP and WTA.
Amazing. Thank you both and welcome. I'm sure you'll both agree that it's a really exciting time for sports marketers at the moment, with international audiences open to sport in different territories more than ever. So with that in mind, I'd be really keen to understand a little bit more about your remits and what you would say, I guess, are the key focus for both of you at the moment in terms of international growth and international reach. So Dan, I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're very much on our infancy in this journey. We, as a club, have been a very regional club for quite a long time. Newcastle is a brand that is a very global brand, but a very regional fan base. And that's just representative of the journey that the club has been on over the number of years. I mean, obviously, you see a lot of the other big Premier League clubs with huge international audiences, and a lot of that can be factored down to success on and off the field, but certainly competing in Europe on a regular basis has a big impact on overall performance of that. Now, unfortunately, we haven't been in that position, albeit we did qualify for the Champions League last year. So it was the first time the club was back on the main European stage and certainly started to see some of the benefits off the back of that. For us, we're very much at the beginning of the journey here, and we've actually just started to commission a piece of work, which is all tied to our brand strategy. And fundamentally, the first part of that work is looking at current audience thoughts, feelings, perceptions across towards the brand of Newcastle United, both fans and non-fans. But then also looking at what international markets effectively offer the biggest opportunity for us as a club and as a brand to grow. So there's a couple of factors within that. There's one which is identifying, those kind of total addressable or serviceable markets. But then the second is also looking at like the brand fit, and does the brand work as a product for those audiences? So anecdotally, for instance, some of the work that we've been doing, if we were looking at the US, because following suit of the Premier League is making huge inroads into the US and is doing a fantastic job there. It would be amiss for us not to piggyback off a lot of the time, energy, effort, and resource I'm sure that they are utilizing to start to build their fan base, and they're doing a fantastic job at that. For us is looking at, okay, well, if we're going to go into the US market, that's fantastic, but realistically, what are the audiences in the US market that are actually going to appeal to the brand of Newcastle United, because that's probably a different audience that's fit for someone maybe following Arsenal or a Spurs or a City. We're a working class city. We're very fan first. We have our history as a city of being that kind of industrious shipbuilding, coal mining, industrious community. And effectively, if you want to look at the US and look at audiences that maybe align with that, you might look at like a Philadelphia or a Pittsburgh and start to identify cities or communities that maybe have more of a brand fit for our product. So it's not just about the total opportunity and market. It's also about, are the audiences and the communities in that market ultimately going to be a fit for our brand? But then also, I guess, what's the commercial return off the back of that? It's pointless us pursuing fan growth in a huge market if there's very little commercial opportunity there.
Amazing, thank you. And James, same question to you. Thinking about your, I guess, key focuses for that international reach.
Yeah. So similarly to Dan, I think we're early on in our journey as we look at international marketplaces, and obviously it's a little bit different with the NFL in terms of the league is really kind of seeded focus markets to different clubs, and for us, it's good and it's bad, right? Dan, I'm sure, is scratching his head a lot thinking about which markets to focus on. We don't have to do that at all because we're focusing on Germany because that's what has been kind of aligned with us with the league. And then with that, Switzerland and Austria as well. And I think as we look at those marketplaces, it's great to be able to focus because I think it allows us to drive a more sort of pointed strategy in terms of how we're going to build our brand in Germany, because we all know that's a very different proposition than building the brand in the UK or Brazil or so on and so forth. That being said, I do think there's some commonalities in terms of how to approach international markets and the things that we can do. Having a strong, confident brand with a point of view that allows people to actually click into something, I think is really important. And I think can be lost a lot of times when brands go international. I think, Dan, you hit it, right? Coming from a world, the sort of global soccer world in the States, the US has long been treated as sort of the up and coming cash cow for football teams globally. But so many of those teams have come in with very mile wide, inch deep strategies and brands to go with it. And so they kind of commoditize their brand and make it not very compelling for teams. And I think that's a perspective that we're trying to use as we think about the NFL in Germany, because now we're in a position where there are 10 teams from the NFL focused on that marketplace. And so it's not only a question of how are we creating great connection with German fans, but also how are we creating a unique connection? How are we creating a brand that has depth, that has feel? And, I think we'd all agree as sort of marketers within sport, winning is great, but that's actually not enough to move the needle, particularly internationally, where you're dealing with a much more casual oriented fan base. If we were dealing with solely acculturated fans, okay, winning and, making sure that we're focusing on our pathway to the Super Bowl, that makes sense. But for a fan that's new to the sport and is enamored with the culture that exists around NFL as much as they are with what's happening on the pitch, it really puts the focus on us. Okay, what's our depth? What is our connectivity for fans, and why are they going to root for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Pittsburgh Steelers or the LA Rams? And so that's a lot of the thinking that we've been doing, and it's helpful because it's happening in conjunction with a sort of page turn moment for our brand as a whole, where we want to be more representative of our community, more cultural centric, and that translates really well to how we think about the international marketplace as well.
Amazing. And with Germany, for example, engaging that new market, how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think, you have one fundamental question, which is, are you going to evolve the brand to fit Germany, or are you going to double down on your brand and try and use that to make it unique? And just speaking to the sort of global football president in the States right before, everybody was trying to Americanize their brand, which is funny because all these American global football fans were looking for the antithetical American brand. So it was not what they were looking for. And Dan's smiling because maybe that resonates with him a little bit and what you guys are talking about.
It's a question we've been asking ourselves over the last handful of weeks and months. And fortunately, it sounds like we're heading down the right direction, but staying true to the truth of the brand and not shifting the brand around the audience is something we're quite keen to do.
Well, it's tough because you want to make sure that you're being conscientious of the market that you're going into. It's not just about going heads down and saying we're not going to change a thing, but we really don't want to be that team that ends up going into Germany and trying to play to, putting Baker Mayfield and Lederhosen and all of that sort of stuff and saying that's our Germany strategy. You guys laugh, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities for some clubs to try that sort of strategy, right? And so it's a really interesting sort of fundamental question. And then once you determine that question, okay, how do we activate that? How do we activate a Tampa-centric brand in Hamburg or Munich, or what does that really mean? Then the rubber really starts to meet the road in terms of what do we do? How do we translate that, right?
And Dan, I guess similarly for you, with less of a focus on specific countries, but a broader international strategy, how are you going about kind of engaging those audiences and new markets?
I mean, it's really difficult to build off what James said. He packaged it perfectly. I think brand is at the core of everything that we're looking to build here at Newcastle United. And to kind of echo what James was saying earlier, it's building a product and building a brand that can survive irrespective of whether the team are winning and losing. And I'm pointing towards the pitch behind me here and say, James, is whether they're winning or losing week on week, because there is a product that exists here. There's a brand that already exists here that our fan base love, and Newcastle as a city and as a club has been loved for a lot of reasons from non-Newcastle fans as well. But the exercise that we're going through right now is really trying to take that brand that exists and refine that and distill that into something very tangible that we can then look to export around the world. And I think the word export is quite intentional, because we really do want to take our product and our brand to those markets and to those communities that it's going to engage with. And we know that it's not a product that's going to resonate with everyone. And we don't want to be that club that just tries to create a generic product in the hope that it's going to appeal to a particular cohort of individuals that someone might see it. We can't be all things to everybody. Yeah. We want to really hone in on our brand truth and find and work really hard and be really diligent in identifying those audiences around the world that are going to connect and engage with that.
And I guess, sorry, James.
No, I was just going to jump in. I mean, I think that's such a tough thing to do in the marketing world. I mean, everybody wants to talk about the depth of their brand and having a point of view, but that's as much about what you're not doing as it is about what you are doing. And so, it can be tough to double down on that. So commend Dan on the team and trying to be focused, because you're splitting the marketplace, but it's the only way to have real conversion and real connection is if you have an actual point of view, right? Yeah.
And I think that's something that's quite unique, or maybe we're starting to see a bit more of it come into sports over the recent years. I think sport historically has been a commodity of sorts that's just trying to be a mass market product to as many people as possible. And maybe football as a whole, or soccer as a whole, maybe does try and do that. And if you are sitting in our shoes in the position of a league, maybe you are trying to take a slightly different approach. But with us as an individual club and as an individual entity in hopefully a very tight brand, and really trying to think about, we're not just a football club, we are a sports and entertainment product, a sports and entertainment brand, and it requires a lot more thought and a lot more consideration around if you were to take that lens to your marketing approach, as opposed to just trying to, I guess, appease everyone.
And I guess both of you kind of touched on it a little bit there, but you're also trying to stay true to your brand, but then also navigate completely new cultural differences and nuances. So when you enter those new markets, so how much does that come into kind of the strategy piece with those emerging markets?
I mean, I think it's at the center of it, right? I think a reoccurring theme, right? But if you build a really core, compelling brand that feels authentic, and it feels like every decision you make is through that sort of lens of how you're getting closer to that brand vision or that brand mission, I think that sort of authenticity, it transcends borders. I mean, obviously you need to be conscientious of where you're focusing, but in this day and age, fans, consumers, whatever, they're all savvy and they're so inundated with polish and things that feel packaged for them. And I think in a lot of ways, like the reason that people gravitate towards sport is because it's like one of the fun, like last authentic platforms that we have to engage where like, you don't know where it's going to happen, right? There is no Hollywood ending to every game necessarily. And so trying to make sure that that authenticity of sport is present in what you do, I think is really important because those true fans, you know, especially like it's no different here, whether you're in Tampa or whether you're in Hamburg, like the romanticism of sport, you have to keep that and make sure that it's unique and authentic. That's the most important thing. And I think once you cross that threshold of fans feeling like they're marketing to, you actually start to lose the magic, right? So it's how do you position it from that perspective? Because as we look at Germany, I mean, the people that are choosing to become NFL fans, it's one, a choice about becoming an NFL fan, but it's also about something that's not being provided by all the other, you know, litany of sport that they can follow in Germany. So it's like, okay, that's a point of authenticity and opportunity for us. Like, how do we double down on that? And doubling down on that a lot of times just means continuing to be true to our brand point of view, right?
Dan, you were nodding again. I'm not with agreement with that.
Yeah, no, and it's also, you know, the kind of the other angle to think about is also, you know, looking at the cultural differences here in our home market as well. You know, we're going on a very pointed commercial journey here at the club, for lack of better definition. We have a job to do as a commercial department to significantly increase our revenues across the business in order to help fuel the engine that is the football club and navigate all the rules around financial fair play and so on and so forth that we have in place here as a football team. But UK fans as a whole, British football fans, don't like to feel like they're being monetized, right? So it's you have to be very, very sensitive as to how you go about that yourself. And James, actually, you kind of hit on that point perfectly. When fans start to feel like they're being marketed towards, that's the point of which it's actually, you know, completely counterproductive to do so. So just being that point where you're being incredibly authentic to your brand, but also just being so diligent in understanding consumer behavior with your product that will vary drastically market to market, and just putting data at the forefront of all that decision making so we can make informed decisions on how we're serving content or ads or marketing collateral to certain audiences at particular stages in their consumption patterns with the club.
And I guess with that in mind, a lot of it, you know, innovation must play a really big part in kind of maintaining that competitiveness on a global scale. I guess, James, coming to you, how do you foster a culture of innovation within the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways to think about it. One is, you know, what are we doing from the sort of like more, you know, traditional look at innovation, which is what can tech do for us, right? So, you know, how can we be smarter about how we engage our fan? You know, to Dan's point, you know, where are they, you know, as an avid fan on a particular platform versus a casual fan, as a domestic fan on a different platform than an international fan. And I think, you know, understanding and letting the data drive us to open up and make sure that our connection points are as valuable as possible and as efficient as possible is fantastic. I think there's another piece of innovation, which is how can you innovate through your point of view as a brand? And, you know, as I was kind of thinking about this on one of the prior topics of talking about just the internationalization of sport and how brands are starting to move to this understanding of, yeah, listen, it's like not all about wins, right? We have to create brands with depth. We need to create brands that have some sort of cultural resonance or relevance outside of what's happening in the win and loss column. And I think you see with all the different teams, and global football is such a good petri dish because everybody's kind of on the same spectrum in terms of what's happening with that. And a lot of teams are building more culturally centric brands. But I think there's this really interesting opportunity for innovation where, because everybody's doing it, you're starting to see a lot of copycat stuff pop up where campaigns and jersey launches are starting to look a little same. And so I think that's really a point where innovation through commitment to brand and a particular point of view can really set you aside and make your brand look innovative because you're trying to say something different and specific than everybody else. It's not just about doing like throwback, which, you know, we just did throwback with our creamsicle jerseys. So I'm a little bit speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but it's really like, okay, throwback or vintage, like everybody's launching a 90s kit right now, right? Okay, that's great. Now, how are you doing that in a way that feels innovative, feels unique to you? Maybe stylistically, there's nods to something else that's happening in the world, but it feels like something that no other club could go and do. And I think trying to run things through that lens, at least here at the Bucs, is a really good thing to make sure that our stuff from a brand perspective, and then from there, creative and so on and so forth, like continues to feel innovative. Because again, like going back to the fans just want to be fans piece, if you spend a lot of time talking about tech and innovation with your fans, I think you're starting to lose the point, right? Like it's all that sort of like core Apple thing of like, give me the tech that just works. I don't want to actually have to think about the tech or think about the innovation, right? So I think all of that stuff's kind of interesting in terms of what you can do from the actual traditional tech innovation, but also leaving room for real brand innovation, which sometimes those things play off of each other and allow you to go to new and different spaces, if that makes sense.
And Dan,
I completely agree, and it's a mentality that we're trying to adopt here at Newcastle United. I mean, fundamentally, there is quite a cookie cutter mold for what success looks like in football, but that mold was developed probably about 10 years ago, and a lot of those top teams who have benefited from that mold are so far ahead at this point that actually us fitting into that mold, quite frankly, is never going to allow us to close that gap. So we have to take a very different mentality towards how we're approaching our marketing activity here at the club. And that's why we're being quite intentional in thinking about our product as a brand and not just as a football club. And that's a very intentional shift across our activity here. So we can't walk into a room with a prospective partner and go, you know, we are, you know, the most highly followed team on social or have the most eyeballs on our fixtures week in, week out. But actually what we can do is walk into a room and go, we might not be the biggest, but we're the most engaged. So, and we you know, that's fact. Like our channels do have the highest average engagement across all Premier League clubs. We can walk into a room and go, we might not be the biggest, but we'll work the hardest. You know, we'll play into our brand mentality here and the community here in Newcastle United of being that industrious city and having that, you know, there's this sort of sense of humor that exists here in the Northeast as well, which is very unique to our region. And, you know, we'll work hard, but we'll do it with a smile on our face. And, you know, that might not sound like innovation, but actually it's change and it's approaching conversations differently. And it's allowing us to table a conversation or sit opposite individuals in a room and be able to present those opportunities to the club because we're taking a slightly different approach to how we're going about our business. So likewise with James, I mean, there's tons of technology that you can kind of, you know, reel off in regard to what benefit it can add to your business and probably no more so than in AI and in the influence that AI is having on the ability to utilize data more effectively, you know, day in, day out. But certainly if we're thinking about innovation, there's a lot to be said about just innovation in mentality and how we're going about our daily work.
And Dan, obviously, you know, Newcastle have got amazing legacy fans, as you say, and kind of that local relevance is so important. But how do you balance that, I guess, with global consistency across your marketing and brand strategies?
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion to be had. But fundamentally, as we define the brand strategy here at Newcastle United, ultimately, the things that will hang off are the brand truths, and they won't change. Right, regardless of where in the world that we go, we will stay true to our core brand beliefs. Now, where there's room for change within that is how you package those truths and make those truths relevant to that regional audience. So, we talked about, I give the example of Philly as a potential, US community that might, I'm not saying it might be a relevant fit for our product here. A lot of those core brand truths could potentially resonate with that audience. However, there's going to be cultural nuances within that community that aren't the same as what they are here at Newcastle. And that's fine. That's where we have to lean on local knowledge. That's where we have to lean on data to inform the decision making, understand what's making that community tick, how are they consuming content, what are they looking for in their content, what they're looking for in the brands that they engage with, and really working hard to understand as much about those audiences as possible, because we don't want to go back to Jim's point. Like, we don't want to fundamentally change our product to ensure that it resonates with that audience. What we want to do is make sure that we're just packaging our product in the right way to make sure that it does resonate with those audiences.
Amazing. And yeah, James, I guess similar question of kind of balancing that global reach and consistency across brand marketing with local relevance.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it speaks to a lot of the stuff that we've talked about already of, like Dan said, like sticking to the brand beliefs and trying to deliver a point of view. And I think, a big thing that we've been grappling with is, really trying to be as strategic as possible and being right about entering the marketplace and all that sort of stuff. I'm also trying to say, listen, at the same token, like, we have to be real with the fact that we're going to learn some things once we start to take a more demonstrable sort of point of view here and start to be on the ground. And that's part of the journey. And I think leaving yourself open as a marketer to learn in the process of, while you're taking on these additional markets is really important. And it's that balance of, to your question, like, okay, core brand beliefs, continue to nail down on that, but also make sure that we don't have our heads in the sand and that we're self-aware when we go to these markets, and we let like the truth of the real, amount of resonance that we have with new German fans or Swiss fans or Austrian fans, and making sure that we see that. I will say though, like, when you come in with that point of view though, or have a particular brand point of view and you're listening at the same time, it also opens you up to those opportunities to double down and say, hey, this is a great encapsulation of the brand that we want to build, and give you that additional path point, within the market, which is super helpful. So like, Dan, I think really, really intelligently is talking about the fact that, Philly could be a great market for Newcastle, just given the cultural integrations. Great. So them going into Philly, they're going to learn something about Philly that is a unique connection point potentially with Newcastle. And that's an opportunity to like double down on that and keep building. And I think there's a lot to be said in terms of just having the willingness to get into market so that you can start to learn. And I think sometimes just organizationally, you spend a lot of time pontificating about this stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that just gets left on the shelf until you actually get in market. Right. So managing that, the flexibility and being open to evolving strategy as you get there, I think is really important in conjunction with this, how do we keep the brand versus evolve the brand?
Thank you. And I know we've talked a lot about kind of international strategy and reach and growth. I guess with that in mind, there's a lot of exciting opportunities coming up for both of you. You obviously need a good team and a great team behind you. Which I know both of you do lead very high performing teams, but it'd be great to understand, I guess, what those challenges are when expanding your team presence internationally, and how you've overcome these, or how you plan to overcome these in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in just kind of with something that is generally something that I'm thinking about a lot, and it's definitely applicable to how we think about international. But as we grow, we're very much kind of turning the page as it relates to brand and marketing here at the Bucs. There hasn't been a CMO since 2018. So this sort of, real sort of synthesis hasn't happened. And, they won a Super Bowl in that time, so they were doing just fine, and they had Tom Brady. But this is a new era of, how do we build more sort of brand sustainability? And I think within that, I've seen a lot of opportunities within the team to get personnel that can really help create that sort of foundational brand. We've got great professionals here at the Bucs, but there's just some things that we haven't thought about. And I think the big lens that I look at, whether it's thinking about somebody for our international strategy or somebody right here in Tampa Bay, is, one lens of, are you a zealot about this community and the story that we're trying to tell? Because that's core to the brand. Or are you a zealot about the game, the game of gridiron football and what that can deliver? And I think that's a good lens to try and view things through, because, better than anybody else, like, this is an industry where you have to have the passion point, because it's going to be what drags you through some of those other challenges. So making sure that we have people that are passionate about what we're doing, we've got two different lenses to view it, I think is really important. The other thing that I feel like I've learned, particularly in my time at Austin FC and now at the Bucs, is, okay, getting great functional operators and people that are great at their discipline, but also people that really truly believe in the mission. Because, and it sounds cliche, and I'm sure people say this all the time, but it is the fundamental difference maker. And, really making sure that it's not only about getting people that are best in class, but people that understand and can synthesize the mission of what you're trying to do as a club. And that just cannot be overlooked. I think so often we're so focused on what's somebody's background and their technical skill set and all that sort of stuff that's really important. But do they get it? Do they get where we're trying to go? And that, if you don't get that right, it's a fundamental thing where you're going to deal with it 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the road. And so in that process of trying to figure out how you bring people on board, making sure that that's a real fundamental thing that you can understand. And that's very true within international. I think we're very much determining our point of view is to be as centric to the Bucs and our Tampa Bay brand, and bring that to Germany. If somebody had a different strategy of, no, you got to go way German, you got to make the Buccaneers more German, that wouldn't really resonate. We'd find ourselves at odds quite a bit. So trying to figure out how we get people that really sort of subscribe to that early on is important for us.
I can only echo that. I think one thing that, particularly in sports that you need to be mindful of is when we're attracting talent is, Newcastle's a fantastic case study, right? Last year we were in the Champions League. This year we're struggling for Europe, right? But it's not about a match by match, fluctuation of whether this is the right place to be or not. It's actually, what is that long-term vision that we have here as a club and as a business, and fundamentally, are you here for the journey? Because it's also like, sport can be all-consuming. It can be all-consuming as well, right? You come into the office on a Monday, and actually, the atmosphere is very different if the team is being, beat on the weekend versus, coming off a really triumphant win. And that's just part of sport. That is just part of the reality of working in sport. But as we look towards that long-term vision, it's ensuring that you've got people that are willing to, grind through those tough days, because that there's going to be better days ahead, and always making sure that we keep our sights set on what long-term success looks like, as opposed to, reflecting on, the past 2 or 3 weeks when maybe fixtures haven't necessarily been going your way, and maybe fan sentiment is skewed a little bit. It's our job as marketers to be immersed in the fan culture, but also being immersed in the fan culture can be tricky at times, right? If you're coming off a bad defeat on the weekend and you tune into a podcast on a Monday and your drive to work, and the team's being slated for whatever it may be, it's difficult to not let that impact you. But the other big thing for us is organizational culture. Huge important for us. It's not just about finding talented people. It's about finding people that fit the organization. We are going through a huge growth period at the moment at the club, like huge growth period at the club at the moment. Our marketing team alone will pretty much double in size over 12 to 18 months. And that includes a lot of new faces coming into the team from a lot of different places, a lot of different backgrounds, and a lot of different skill sets and expertise. The one thing that we're trying to ensure consistent is that they obviously fit within the culture of the organization, and making sure that we are reducing that impact that all organizations will see, and we'll see it and we'll feel it. Like, there will be growing pains as we go on this journey. But if we don't get the right people that fit the culture that we have here within the business, I feel like that's where we could really shoot ourselves in the foot. So something we're being very, very mindful of.